Yo! What up? Necromancer? Buffed. Guardian? Nerfed. Bama? Untouched. Which means that yes, Necromancer is now the Bama King. Or Queen. It's the best ascendancy now. So I did a test run. Very similar to my Splitting Steel test run. I tried to give it bad gear. And as you can see, I failed miserably because this skill refuses to do bad damage no matter what I do. 4-link, 6-link, crap bow in the campaign, crap bow on league start, bad bow on guardians. It just didn't seem to ever lose damage. And I tried. Trust me, I tried. If you want to see the whole progress and of me trying to make it do bad damage, I stream on Twitch, waffles_GG, and you can go glance at that VOD. And it's just basically me playing the build for 10 hours and just trying to make it suck and failing at making it suck. Yes, that was a shameless plug. But on a real note, let's talk Transfigured Gems. You log in at level 1 on Friday and you're excited for your league start. You do not start the game with Bama. Now, I have a plan to get a Transfigured Gem. I'm not going to say it's a good plan, but I have 2 or 3 plans. Now the good news is that even if you're not going to get Transfigured Gem at the start, you can just level as SRS. At least that's my recommendation. Feel free to play or level as whatever you want. But I'll have an SRS basic leveling guide that I crafted up. And yes, SRS was nerfed. No, you are absolutely not going to notice it until you hit T16 maps. And this is a Bama build guide, so you're not going to make it to that far. This is your red alert. This is your warning. If you are not confident on getting Bama as a league start, take this video and just put it as your second build. You know, take this build, the POB, and just be like, nope, that's my second build. If you're confident on getting Transfigured Bama, one of the 2 versions on league start, then I have a plan. Now, I play hardcore trade, which means I have to get it myself. Long story short, nobody's going to sell it to me because everybody's going to take it and hoard it for day 2 and then sell it. The other glaring issue is I guarantee Bama is going to be one of the most played builds in the entire league because it just simply does way too much damage with crap gear. So my first plan is basically I'm going to hit level 40 and I'm going to go farm normal lab for 3 hours. Any other Transfigured Gems I find that are worth money, I will hold on to and then sell several hours later because that's still just money, right? It doesn't feel good to farm normal lab on league start, which is why I'm saying this is a stupid plan. You should probably do plan B. Right before you kill Katava and you progress into maps, stop, go back and just go farm either normal lab, which, you know, obviously you can do even faster now, or merciless lab and get one of the Bama skills. Now specifically, you're looking for blink arrow or mirror arrow of bombardment. It has to be one of those 2 because that's the version that uses rain of arrows. Mirror arrow means when you shoot it, you don't teleport, which is safer. The blink arrow version means you are going to teleport, which is unsafer. However, on league start, we don't care which one we get. We just want one. Now here's your warning. In the gauntlet, I farmed for 3 hours, 2 different times to try to get the gem I wanted because I got really unlucky. The good news is that Bama has 2 versions, which means you have a much higher chance of finding one. But if you get unlucky, you still might be in normal lab for an hour to an hour and a half, which obviously might suck if you're a newer player. But if your expectations are right, then I think you'll be okay with it because any other gems you find, obviously, you can sell. However, if this doesn't sound like something you want to do, you can just play SRS, go into maps, farm up some money, and then just buy the gem from somebody else. Any of these versions will do it, but as a hardcore trade player, I have to get it myself, and that's the 2 ways I'm thinking of doing it. Aside from that, Bama is nuts. It does a lot of damage, the minions are fairly tanky. With the Necromancer buff, everything just has more health. You don't really do more damage, but you also have consistent leech, which means you have natural consistent regen, and you still get the fizz damage reduction, even though we won't be taking advantage of 10% of that. We'll just be taking advantage of about 6 to 7% fizz damage reduction. It's still just a lot of just juice in 2 buffed nodes. The basic league start version I'll be talking about is about 5 to 6 million damage, and obviously I'm using crap gear on purpose. It's not terrible gear, but it's reasonably expected that you could get this after playing for about 20 to 30 hours of gameplay. Now, first things first, if you've never seen one of my guides, I like to break down the pad, numbers, and all this stuff, so you know that I'm not bullshitting you and that I probably actually am lying to you, and the video and the footage you've seen was less damage than what I was actually probably doing. Now, very simple. If you pause it on any of these bosses, they had about 20% shock on average, some a little bit higher, some a little bit lower, so I just leave it on 20. As usual, Guardian Pinnacle bosses, always make sure that's on. And let's talk about how Rain of Arrows / Mirror Arrow works. It's pretty simple. The mirror arrow of bombarding clones uses your bow and your quiver to do damage, which means you are basically replicating your bow and your quiver 3 times. Now you have 3 clones out and they shoot rain of arrows. Now the thing that's interesting is that rain of arrows is weird. It actually overlaps, so it shoots out, one giant AoE, but those AoEs essentially overlap with each other, and near the center they can hit again and again and again. Now on average with no AoE, it's going to hit about 3-ish times. So for map clear, you can have this on because obviously you just want bigger clear, but if you're more focusing on bossing or single target, then turn that off because you want the overlapping to happen more, and that only happens when you have less AoE. Now if you're picking up what I'm putting down, and we do just some more or less some basic math. Now as usual, I'm borrowing information from people much smarter than me and Reddit mathematicians and people who've played Rain of Arrows for several years. Everybody estimates that it's about 9. 9 is your safe point. With AoE, it's probably 8. If the boss is large enough, it doesn't matter. However, there is a glaring thing right here, Conk Effect. If you turn on Conk Effect, yes, it will be more damage than Lightning Pen, and it makes that AoE overlap even more. So this definitely goes up to 10. We just don't know if it consistently hits 11. It goes from basically 3 to 3.5 with Conk Effect, and it's just really, really hard to tell. So basically, you'll definitely get one more overlapping, and if the boss is big enough, maybe it's 11, but that's just how Rain of Arrow works and has kind of always worked. So we're going to take this down to 9 and put in Lightning Pen. If you run Conk Effect, you can turn that to 10. But I'd only recommend Conk Effect if you're doing Guardians Plus and you're going to do like a whole long farm session. So now we understand basic overlapping. This is about 9. We're at about 5 million damage. So let's explain the overall DPS. Now, as usual, I'd rather do less damage than more. The specters I'm running are just the basic Carnage Chieftain and Host Chieftain, and they just give power charges and frenzy charges to your minions and you. Now, on the worst case scenario, which is what I always assume, we only have 1. If you had all 3, you would have 6.2 million damage. More often than not, if you're fighting a boss, it's probably 2, but probably isn't good enough for me. So let's leave it at 1 and just underestimate our damage. And if we do more damage, then we're just pleasantly surprised. Give or take, we're only going to have about 7 of these, and this is just your physical damage reduction from the Ascendancy. This doesn't give us damage because we're not using any OP Ghastly Jewels. This doesn't really do anything either. Feeding Frenzy is on our Spectre and Animate Guardian. Fresh Meat is our support, which means you have to resummon Bama as often as possible. Now, we do kind of have a little bit of a mana problem. That would be solved in the giga expensive version, but on this version, it's not really an issue at all. But you do want to summon Bama as often as possible because you want to maintain Fresh Meat and the adrenaline buff it gives. Also, it gives crit, and it is kind of the best support in the game, if we're being honest. This doesn't do anything because we don't have buffs. This doesn't give curses, and it doesn't matter how much health you put here because it does the math for you. But this is just for Jinx Juju effective HP. The enemy's cursed, and this is just for the mastery over here to make sure this works. So we get that extra 8% pen, and that's it. Now you know how the skill works. Now let's go start talking about leveling. Now, my POBs, I like to give you multiple options, and I try to make this as simple as possible. I spend about, I'd say 2 hours kind of creating this whole section just by itself. And I'm just trying to think, what would I do? And then what would I want to tell a friend, a newer player to do? And I would say level as SRS until you get Bama. Now, SRS is kind of crap until you get to like level 8 where you have minion damage and access to melee splash. 2 blue, 1 red if you're not aware what those colors would be. But until then, just run Rolling Magma, Ellie Prolif, Flame Wall, Frost Blink, get Flame Dash later, and then you can have Holy Flame Totem, Summon Phantasm. This is actually really good. It's kind of to help your damage supplement against like Brutus and stuff, but you won't be wearing this for very long, but you have to use something until we get to about level 8. SRS is a level 4 gem, but it's pretty damn bad without anything. Alright, so very simple. We're just going to go SRS. Not much to say here, but I will briefly go over it just in case you haven't done SRS leveling in a while. Now, always make sure the tree lines up. So, 1 to 12. Nothing special, we just want to get the minion node, right? 8 to 37, yes, you want to go and continue along the way. Please make sure these are all lined up. The numbers in the reservation will look very strange if you don't follow it 1 to 1. Now, obviously we have 5 gems here, but this is more just like if you get unlucky on colors, right? I'm assuming that this is just like your league start. Now let's just change this to 1 for visual sake. So if you found a 4 link at this point and you're not, level 38 to where you get Unleash or anything like that, then you can just do Melee Splash, Melee Fizz, Summon SRS mini damage. If you have 3 blue, 1 red, then just drop Melee Splash and then run Infernal Legion. This is slightly better, and Infernal Legion does fall off fairly quickly, but up until about 38, it's still viable and usable. It's not too big of a deal. But ideally, you would run, you know, this 2 colors. But hey, if you're on a 3-link, it is what it is. The only thing that's really worth mentioning here, you want to pick one. If you're softcore and you want damage, take anger. If you're hardcore or just want to be somewhat tanky, just take determination. It only gets really interesting from this point on. So 38 plus. The tree is pretty much the same for both. It's really not a big deal. Minion stuff is minion stuff. Don't got to worry about it. But we do have some things to say here. So like I said, colors are colors. It really just depends. If you're strong enough and you feel like you've gotten pretty lucky on minion damage gear so far, maybe you got a good wand or whatever, good shield, and you can just run Unleash. This is obviously faster and it means that you're going to shoot out more SRS more often. But if you feel like you really need the damage, then obviously you can just run Melee Fizz. It's not really a big deal. This also is a color thing, right? Yeah, same thing as last time. If you have 3 blue and you can only pick 1 red, then you would just take Melee Splash and you'd run Unleash. If you have 2 blue, 2 red, then you would just take off Unleash and you just run Melee Fizz. Both are fine. It's just more about whatever you got to use. You can't go wrong. SRS is pretty brain dead. Ray Zombie, you add Combustion. This is going to ignite mobs. And this is mostly just bosses. You just want them to hit the boss and they'll lower their fire res, which is just a way for us to get a little bit more damage on bosses with SRS. Use Flesh Offering, probably only on bosses. Don't really keep using it. You'll just slow yourself down. And mana. If you have decent mana and you're fine, or you have an Enduring Mana Flask or whatever, then I would recommend personally that you run Determination and then either Anger or Haste. Anger is more damage early on, but Haste is like me zoom go faster, and then Defiance Banner. So pick one, either Anger or Haste, but no matter what, run Determination and Defiance Banner. This is really just how strong do you feel, you know? If you're Bama leveling, the tree is the exact same. This is really straightforward and simple. The footage you're seeing on the bottom right has been just leveling. It'll switch to the end game once we get to the end game part of the tree. But as you can see, I'm essentially just zooming and I wore just absolute garbage. I'd recommend just faster attacks just because you don't need the damage and it just means they shoot faster for the clear. And just level elemental damage bows, you know, just get elemental damage. You know, for SRS, you were just doing, you know, basic minion stuff. But for Bama, you just get like some LE damage and then LE damage. That's it. Don't overthink it. It doesn't matter which one it is. You can just zoom through the entire game all the way to maps. It's not a big deal. Determination, Defiance Banner, get tanky, run Generosity on Wrath and Precision. Please, for the love of God, do not link Determination with Generosity. Generosity makes it so these auras do not affect us, which is really good when it works on minions. Really bad if we were to put Determination with that, because then we would lose all of our armor. So just do this. Alright, so you're actually switching to Bama and we have enough points to actually go to this side of the tree. First of all, these nodes do nothing. They do not give you any damage. They are completely useless and a waste of time. The only thing we get out of this entire wheel is some evasion rating, 6% move speed. That's it. But the blink arrow cooldown is too good to pass up. This makes it so you actually will be able to consistently summon your minion, right? And inadvertently, it just means that you're going to move through maps quicker. So we have to get this on no matter which version of Bama you run. The only other option is this one, and it's in the middle of nowhere. So like, I don't know. I couldn't make it work. I think this version's better. And you're just getting, you know, suppression, basic tree stuff, nothing special to talk about. However, let's start talking about the gear changes. And now some interesting tech. So we drop Flame Dash in this setup because we're basically going to summon this, a Blink Arrow version. Now, it doesn't matter which one this is. It can be Blink Arrow, it can be Mirror Arrow. It doesn't matter. It's its own thing. Okay, they don't override each other. So you can just have two and it counts as its own. But basically, you can attach Guardian's Blessing to this clone. The gameplay loop is that you run, you summon your minion that does damage, and then for your quote-unquote Flame Dash or movement, you use Blink Arrow of Prismatic. You'll teleport, and then you press Haste, and you turn it on, the same way you would if it was Divine Blessing, and you just repeat that loop over and over again. This thing will give Feeding Frenzy, and as long as you're in the general area of it, it gives haste to everything around it. So you just Mirror Arrow, and then you Blink Arrow, and once haste is on, you don't have to press it again unless you ran too far away from the minion. So pretty much after, I don't know, 2 or 3 maps, it'll make more sense. And you're just Mirror Arrow, Blink Arrow, Mirror Arrow, Blink Arrow, and then you'll have haste on the whole time, and it's pretty busted and kind of dumb, and it feels amazing. In the super endgame version, we dropped this because this is, you know, it's good and it's consistent, but it is another button to press, and I'd rather just put on an Eldritch Battery later. But for this version, we can't go Eldritch Battery, and this is the next best thing. For the Spectres, you know, the typical tanky stuff. You're going to use the Host Carnage setup. The monkeys, you can get them in Act 2. This is just, you know, old tech. Get the monkeys to give frenzies and the power charges. And then the Animate Guardians, super generic, nothing special. His gear is right here. It's this typical, you know, normal damage stuff, nothing special. I didn't use the Animate Guardian in any of my testing just because I felt like I had so much damage. I didn't want to bother buying it from people in standard. Outside of that, Determination, Defiant Spinner, Giga Tanky, Big Chillin', no problem. And that's the build. It's really straightforward. I don't really have a lot to say here. Once you kind of get the gear going, it's pretty much on its own. And speaking of the gear, this thing is pretty bad. That's just tier 4 lightning. I used a Screaming Essence of Fear and it hit tier 4 lightning and it had bad crit chance on it. And I was like, yeah, that's good enough. I'll kill guardians with this crap bow. Now in the notes section down here, obviously there's a lot of info, and hidden down here is going to be the Giga info to craft a super bow. I learned all of this from Previ, and Previ's kind of the goat for Bama. So if you want to see anything, go check out Previ. But he has a Giga bow, and this is how you would craft the Giga bow. This is just a basic bow that you can get from essences with no fracture. And the same thing with the quiver. That lightning damage is pitiful. I'm pretty sure that's tier 3 as well. And it just has crit multi, and I crafted life on it. Or crafted attack speed, but yeah, you get the point. This thing sucks. Now, defensively, obviously I'm going to spend more money. I'd rather not inflate the DPS, but for defenses, I'm a hardcore player, so this is definitely the gear I actually will go for. And we do have a mana issue. If you do have mana issues, I am anointing Dreamer just for the mana. Worst case scenario, just take Righteous Decree if you're really struggling on mana, at least until you get non-channeling crafts. If you get 2 non-channeling crafts on your ring, then that pretty much solves it, but obviously we don't start with that, so, you know, do what you gotta do. Aside from that, you know, we're just running that fizz damage taken as fire. Without this stuff, our fizz damage hit would go pretty bad, so kind of need it. We also do need dex because depending on the bow you get, ideally you wouldn't use a spine bow. Ideally you would use an ivory bow for a less dex requirement. It's really just up to how you do it. So just keep in mind, you know, a ivory bow works in a jiff, a thicket bow, whatever. A spine bow is probably going to be the more commonly sold item if you were to buy it. Keep in mind the dex requirement. I just went with a spine bow just because worst case scenario you have to have a lot of dex, but you definitely can just go for an ivory bow. Chest piece, pretty generic, you know, determination, aura effect. We're just trying to get armor. We're trying to get fizz damage reduction. No damage on here, nothing insane. Obviously this is, you know, quite a bit of armor, but just harvest crafting this with either yellow juice with fizz or just smacking enough essences and you'll get something similar to this. It's impressive, but it's not exactly the most rare thing. For gloves, just damage and suppression. You don't even necessarily need that suppression. The one thing is that on this gear, you'll notice that the suppression rolls are pretty bad, and that's just because we went right side tree, and right side tree just gives a lot of suppression, so we don't actually need much suppression, which means we can kind of just double down on getting some big armor and solving our reses. So nothing special, you know, essence craft, same thing, you know, essence craft. Jinx Juju, just because the Spectre's losing HP before you, is just really good for effective health. It's high chaos res, aura effect. Classic, good, pretty cheap. And the reason we're working so hard on our reses on this is so we can actually run Bone Ring. Now you can run an unset ring. I am not going to recommend doing an automation setup. However, if you wanted to automate Desecrate and Spirit Offering, for example, you can actually just drop this whole setup, move Feeding Frenzy to Right Spectre Animate Guardian, get rid of either Meat Shield or Minion Life. And here you could, you know, run Spirit Offering, Desecrate, Life Tap with automation, or maybe you add Enduring Cry to War Cry Call or whatever. There's options. You'll have open sockets, and if you add unset rings, then you can obviously make automation and stuff work better. However, a bit complicated. I don't know how it's going to feel, so that's just me kind of adding some theory there. If you're not going to go unset rings, then you can go bone rings. Very simple. Minion damage, minion res, minion life will do too. Nothing special here, just classic DPS and our minions hopefully surviving. Stygian Vice, just bunch of res, nothing special. And the Ghastly Jewel. This is tier 3 or tier 2 lightning. It's not incredibly hard to get, just harvest and yellow juice will get you this, and that's pretty much it for this gear. There's really not a lot to say here. It's just generic gear that's just suppression based. And that's it for this. I mean, honestly, that's it for the entire build guide. The build is kind of plays itself at a certain point. I don't really feel like, besides mechanically, I'm really adding anything here, because Bama is just nuts. I'm still thinking about it. It's 2 a.m. I lost my voice. I'm sleepy. See you on League Start.